Good evening, everyone. This week's Parshas Vayigash, Tavshin Pei Beis. I'd like to dedicate tonight's learning, memory of my mother, Mrs. Shlomis Rabinowitz, Shlomis Bas Rabbi Yaakov Eliezer. So in this week's Parsha, Yosef reveals himself to his brothers. Until now, they did not realize that he, the viceroy of Egypt, was their brother that they had sold into slavery. As we know from last week's Parsha, when the brothers came to buy food because of the famine, they didn't recognize Yosef, but Yosef recognized them. Yosef told them if they want to be able to, Yosef accused them of being spies. To prove that they're not spies, they had to bring down Binyamin. When eventually Binyamin was brought down, Yosef hid his goblet in Binyamin's sack, accusing him of stealing it. And he said, Binyamin is going to stay here as my slave. You could all go home. And this week's Parsha opens with Yehuda pleading with Yosef to take him instead of Binyamin, to have to see how broken his father would be with the fact that Binyamin didn't come back. So the Torah tells us that it came to a point where Yosef could not himself back anymore. Perek Memhei Pasuk Aleph, chapter 45, verse 1 reads, Vayikra, and Yosef called out, Hotziu kol ishmei alai, remove everyone from before me. V'lo ish itai, no person stood with him. V'isvada Yosef el echav, and Yosef made himself known to his brothers. So Rashi tells us, why was it that Yosef made sure that everybody should leave? So Rashi comments, because Yosef knew how ashamed his brothers would feel when he would reveal himself to them, which the Torah does tell us that when Yosef did reveal himself to them, they were just completely in shock and speechless. So knowing that they'd be very ashamed of what they did, he didn't want them to have to go through that shame in front of other people other than himself. So it was about Yosef being sensitive to their embarrassment. The Zohar, the Holy Zohar, which is the source of all Kabbalistic writings and concepts, gives another explanation. And I don't know if when the Zohar says, what I'm about to share with you, was Yosef's intent or giving us something more behind the scenes of what had to be. The Zohar says that Yosef, revealing himself to his brothers, and now becoming united with them again. Because once Yosef revealed himself, they were able to come to terms with each other. They could be at peace with each other. Yosef uniting with his brothers represented something much more sublime. It represented God uniting with the Jewish people. That's what's happening here. We have what's happening to us, a physical interaction between Yosef and his brothers. And we also have something much deeper that it represents. Yosef uniting with his brothers represents God uniting with the Jewish people. And when God unites with the Jewish people, when he has that intimate oneness with the Jewish people, no other peoples can be around. Only God and the Jewish people. Other people, other nations, other people can't be present. Where does this idea come from? So the Zohar says it comes from something that we mention very often. And that is that after the holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we have the holiday of Sukkot and the 8th day Shmini Atzeres. And the Torah tells us that during Sukkot, in the Musaf offerings and the additional offerings brought for during Sukkot, there are 70 cows that are brought, a total of 70 cows over the 7 days of Sukkot. And those 70 cows represent the nations of the world. We have a tradition brought down to the Talmud, the Midrashim, that when God scattered the people by the Tower of Babel, they were divided into 70 nations. The 70 cows represent those 70 nations. The sacrifice we're bringing on Sukkot are for the benefit of the nations of the world. Shmini Atzeres, things become very different. there's only one cow that's brought on Shmini Atzeres. One cow. Why is that? What does that represent? So the Talmud tells us it represents the following. It compares it to a king. King, he's made a big feast. And in that feast, he invites all his officers and all the different peoples of his kingdom, all the representatives of his kingdom, and his family, of course. And after the celebration, when everyone is done, the king tells his family, stay here for one more day so that you and I can just spend time together. So the 70 cows of Sukkot represent the fact that we bring sacrifices to the other nations. They're also involved in the holiday. Shmini Atzeres, the day after the king's grand party with everyone, is one cow, representing the Jewish people alone. Now is time for God and the Jewish people alone. And that means that when there is a time of oneness with the Jewish people, when God when there's a unification of God and the Jewish people, no other people can be present. That's the paradigm of Shmini Atzeres. And when there's this God and the Jewish people coming together alone as one, no other peoples can be present. There's something similar that we find, and that is that on Yom Kippur, when the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, the Torah says no one is allowed in the Mishkan, no one is allowed in the tabernacle or in the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, where the Kohen Gadol goes into the Holy of Holies. Because when God unites with the Kohen Gadol, with the high priest in the Holy of Holies on the holiest day of the year, when there is that unification of the Kohen Gadol and God, no one else can be present. Therefore, says the Zohar, when Yosef, now we become united with his brothers, that represented something bigger. It represented God unifying with the Jewish people. Yosef represents God, the tribes, they represent the Jewish people. And when there's that unification of God and the Jewish people, no other peoples can be present. Now, why did this unification of Yosef and the brothers need to represent God's unification with the Jewish people? What was going on that this needed to be? And Rabbi Yaakov Haber of Israel explains, because now when Yosef would now reveal himself to his brothers and tell his brothers to bring the whole family down, Yaakov and the rest of the family down, this was the beginning of the Shibud Mitzrayim. This was the beginning of the enslavement of the Jewish people in Egypt. This was to be their first gullus, their first exile. And they had to be able to survive the years of slavery in Egypt and come out of that as the Jewish people receive the Torah. For that to be able to happen under these very trying circumstances of slavery in Egypt, there had to be a unification of God and the Jewish people. There had to be a unique coming together so that the connection to God would stay with them throughout the bondage in Egypt so that they can survive and come out to be the Jewish people who receive the Torah. So Yosef and his brothers represent that coming together of God and the Jewish people, which would be the preparation. And we can call it a prerequisite for the bondage in Egypt from which the Jewish people, as the Jewish nation, the nation of the Torah, were to emerge. That is a fascinating explanation as to what was happening here between Yosef and his brothers. And clearly, if there was going to be unification of Yosef and his brothers, it was necessary for them to shed all the animosity, jealousy, anger, that whole had to go because they couldn't unite otherwise. And they couldn't then represent the unification of God and the Jewish people. Because we know that when we are unified, we can become one with God. God is one, the Jewish people are one, and for us to become one with him, we have to be one within ourselves. That means united in peace with each other. So that's what had to be happening here for that representation of God in front of the Jewish people to take place. And we know when it comes to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, Talmud tells us the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because there was sinas chinam, there was hatred amongst the Jewish people. And because of that, God departed from our midst. For us to be one with God, we have to be one. And therefore, clearly, the process of Yosef and his brothers to be one with God meant they had to be one with themselves, but one within themselves. And they could be one with God and represent the unification of God and the Jewish people. Next week will be the fast of Asara B'Teves, the 10th day of the month of Teves. Actually, a week from today, next Tuesday. And Asara B'Teves is the first of the fasts that we observe to commemorate the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Asara B'Teves was when when the Babylonians laid siege on Jerusalem. The 17th of Tammuz, which is the next fast in the order, is when the walls of Jerusalem were breached. Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, is when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. And then we have on the day after Rosh Hashanah, Gimel Tishrei, we have Tzom Gedalia, the fast of Gedalia, which actually took place, which represents what happened after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, when the governor, the Babylonian appointed governor, Gedalia ben Achikam of Yerushalayim, was murdered, which brought further destruction upon the Jewish people. So these are the four fasts that commemorate the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And Asara B'Teves is the first in the order. Asara B'Teves, at least around, this part of the hemisphere, is anything above the equator, we're in the winter, is a very short fast. It's the shortest of the fasts. And sometimes because of that, we don't give it the same significance that we give the other fasts. But actually, Asara B'Teves is very unique. The Chassam Sofer, Moshe Sofer, who's another Chassam Sofer, writes that on the very first Asara B'Teves, there was a judgment in heaven as the Babylonians were going to lay siege on Jerusalem. There was a judgment in heaven going on, a decision to be made. Will this be besieging of Jerusalem? Would it eventually turn into the destruction of Jerusalem, the Beis HaMikdash? That judgment took place on Asara B'Teves, on the first day, on the 10th of Teves. And we know how that judgment came out. The Beis HaMikdash was destroyed eventually. And therefore, says the Chassam Sofer, every Asara B'Teves, from then on, the same judgment takes place. The first judgment was, would it be destroyed, the Beis HaMikdash? From then on, it became, will it come back? Will it be rebuilt? So every year, Asara B'Teves is a day of judgment. It's a day of judgment of our future. What will our future be? Will the Beis HaMikdash come back? Will we be able to be in Israel? Would a Beis HaMikdash worshiping God? Would a world truly at peace? Every Asara B'Teves, that judgment is taking place. So Asara B'Teves is a very serious day. A day that's very important to contemplate what caused destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And as we mentioned before, the Talmud teaches us that there was a sin of the Jewish people that caused destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. The first Beis HaMikdash was the three cardinal sins of idol worship, immorality, and murder. The second was because of sinas chinam, unwarranted hatred amongst the Jewish people. The reason that the Talmud teaches us these reasons is because it means to tell us that this was the cause of why we lost it, and this is the cause of why we haven't gotten it back yet. And we have to do our part in rectifying that sin so that the Beis Hamikdash can eventually come back. And therefore, if Asar B'Tevis is that day of judgment for whether we'll get the Beis Hamikdash back or not, that's they clearly to contemplate what were the spiritual causes, what were the true causes of destruction, and to work on rectifying it so it should come back. And getting back to what we just said before about Asar B'Tevis being a day of judgment, because of the Chassam Sofer explains that the halacha commentator is right, that if Asar B'Tevis were to fall out on Shabbos, it doesn't. But if it were to fall, it falls out on Friday, one of the few fasts that fall out on Friday. But if it would fall out on Shabbos, we would observe it. Now, there's only one other fast that if it falls out on Shabbos, we observe, and that's Yom Kippur. If Tisha B'Av, Shavasar B'Tammuz fall out on Shabbos, which they do, they get pushed off to the next day. But would that be Asar B'Tevis? If Asar B'Tevis were to fall out on Shabbos, we'd keep it. Why? So Chassam Sofer answers, the difference between Asar B'Tevis and the other fasts is very basic. The 17th of Tammuz is for what happened. Tisha B'Av is for what happened. Asar B'Tevis is about what happened and what will happen. It's a day of judgment. We're fasting on that day because it's a day of judgment for our future. That's not just commemorating a past misfortune. It means Asar B'Tevis is a day of distress for the Jewish people. It's a very, very serious day. It's a day that everything that our lives are hanging are dependent on. That's called an Eis Sar. That's called a time of distress. When the Jewish people find themselves in a time of distress, they're allowed to fast on Shabbos. And therefore, were Asar B'Tevis to fall out on Shabbos, we'd keep it. Because we're not just commemorating the past. We have a present day situation. We're in the middle of a very serious judgment. And therefore, even to be on Shabbos, we'd be able to fast. That's the kind of day Asar B'Tevis is. So again, a very important day to observe properly, respectfully, and to contemplate the causes and to see what we're going to rectify it, to bring the Beis Hamikdash back, at least another step closer. I'm going to share you one last thought from the Chassam Sofer, very interesting idea. It also relates to Asar B'Tevis. The Chassam Sofer says, well, it really relates to the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash as a whole. The Chassam Sofer, as I mentioned, the Gemara tells us the reasons for the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. The first one, the 3 cardinal sins. The second one, Sinas Chinam, the hatred, the disunity that existed amongst the Jewish people. There are other sources of the Talmud that talk about other sins that were also the cause. There were also causes of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Which means that we have the primary sins, the primary cause, and then we have, let's just call them secondary causes. Secondary causes. So Chassam Sofer says, it must be that one of the other causes for the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash had to have been Chilul Shabbos, desecration of Shabbos. Some level of desecration. Because if Shabbos would have been kept, then the Beis Hamikdash could never have been touched, could never have been destroyed. Shabbos is that protection for us that says that kind of if we have Shabbos in its fullest, then we'd never be able to lose the Beis Hamikdash. We wouldn't be able to lose that connection to God. The only possibility for the destruction for the Beis Hamikdash to be destroyed is because there was some shortcoming in our observance for Shabbos. Unbelievable idea. So let's talk about Shabbos a little bit. Let's talk about a way that we can improve our Shabbos. As we know, Shabbos has its things that we are prohibited from doing. We call that malacha, work. We have things that are permitted for us to do on Shabbos. They don't fall under any kind of category of forbidden activity on Shabbos. And then there is what we have to do on Shabbos, which is such as make Kiddush. So we have what we may do, what we may not do, and what we're supposed to do. Now, there is a rabbinic decree that says that on Shabbos, we do not talk the same way we speak on Shabbos during the week. For instance, you don't talk business on Shabbos. Business is weekday activity. The way we talk during the week, we talk in business. We don't talk on Shabbos. And the wording that's used for this decree in the Talmud is Shelo yehi diburcha b'Shabbos k'mei diburcha b'chol. Shelo yehi diburcha. Your words shall not be on Shabbos. Your words will not be on Shabbos as your words are during the week. We don't speak about our weekday activities on Shabbos. So we don't talk business. We don't talk other things also, not just business. We don't talk about on Shabbos what we're not allowed to do on Shabbos, in the sense of, to say on Shabbos that after Shabbos, I will do this and this, which I can't do on Shabbos. You're not allowed to say that on Shabbos. The way we talk on Shabbos has to be special. It should not be the way we talk a whole week. There are commentaries that say that this phrase also carries a very important message about Shabbos. The wording is Shelo yehi diburcha b'Shabbos k'mei diburcha b'chol, so that which literally translated is so that your words will not be on Shabbos as your words are during the week. The words on Shabbos will not be like the words during the week. So, in its simple sense, it's a directive. Make sure your words on Shabbos are not like your weekday words. But there are svarim, there are books that say, commentaries that say that it's actually a message. It's telling us about our words on Shabbos. It's telling us, Shelo yehi diburcha b'Shabbos. So your words will not be on Shabbos like your words during the week. It's a fact. Your words on Shabbos are not like your words during the week. Your words on Shabbos are much more powerful than they are during the week. The prayers that you say on Shabbos are much more powerful than the prayers you say during the week. The words of Torah that you learn, that you study on Shabbos, are much holier and powerful than the words that you study during the week. That's a very important lesson about Shabbos. Yes, Shabbos is a time to rest. Shabbos is family time. And Shabbos is a time to make sure that we utilize our words properly. Because the words on Shabbos, our words on Shabbos, are not like our words during the week. They're much more powerful. They're holier. So Shabbos is clearly a time for prayer, which is, we do more of that on Shabbos. And we should make sure to utilize that properly, to make sure that all our opportunities for davening on Shabbos are used to their fullest. And it also means that we make sure to utilize our time on Shabbos for Torah study, because our words on Shabbos are much more powerful than our words during the week. I'm going to share with you something very interesting about a very interesting practice, minhag, that was practiced by Jews over 100 years ago. And there are still Jews who do it now. There are those who have a practice to get up very early. They get up early Shabbos morning to study Gemara, to study Talmud. Shabbos morning, get up very early. During the week, you get up very early, maybe if you go to work. And maybe during the week, you don't get up that early at all. There are those who especially get up early on Shabbos morning to study Gemara. And I saw a similar custom recorded in the biography of Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. Rabbi Kamenetsky told of how, as a young boy, his father would take him, listen to this, at 2 a.m. Shabbos morning, We call that Friday night. 2 a.m. to the shul. Too early for davening. But to a packed synagogue of people studying Torah. 2 o'clock in the morning. And they did this the whole night. The memory of the special kichel. Kichel is a baked food. The memory of the special kichel baked for those who awoke to study remained fresh in his memory almost a century later. He told how in one corner there was someone teaching others, while those who could study Talmud Gemara did so. And Rabbi Kamenetsky said that he later found in the responsa of Rabbi Bratranoi Gon, who died in 859 AD, a source for the custom of studying Torah throughout the night of Shabbos. The Jews in the Babylonian exile complained that they had no time to study Torah. This is after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, before the return of the Jewish people to Israel for the building of the second Beis HaMikdash. The Jews in the Babylonian exile complained that they had no time to study Torah. So the prophets among them decreed that they should learn from midnight until Shachris, until the morning service is Shabbos morning. Rabbi Kamenetsky told of how in his hometown, Friday Shabbos morning, Shachris, was later during the week so that the people who were learning would have more time to learn throughout the night and then learn more into the morning and then daven. So that's just a fascinating custom, which means which for us, whether we can get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, even 4 o'clock in the morning to do that is, questionable. But it means that maybe we should get up a little bit earlier Shabbos morning for the purposes of learning. For sure, get up early enough to be at davening in time and to be able to make sure that we get in as much davening properly as we can, get in as much davening as we can. It means that we should make sure on Shabbos to learn Torah more than usual, because this is what Shabbos is a unique time for. Our words on Shabbos are holier than during the week. We have to make sure to use them properly in davening, singing Shabbos Amiris, studying Torah, speaking words of Torah at the Shabbos table. All these are things that fall under keeping Shabbos. Yes, there's the keeping Shabbos to make sure we don't desecrate Shabbos in doing activities that we're not allowed to do. But then there's a level of desecrating Shabbos when we don't observe Shabbos and we don't sanctify Shabbos as we should. And the highest form of observing Shabbos is to utilize Shabbos, is to make sure that the words that we say on Shabbos, which are so powerful, are used as they should be. That the power of our words should be used for Torah study and for davening. That would be a way for us to improve our keeping of Shabbos, to improve and to rectify one of the causes of destruction. Together with Anasara B'Tevis, thinking about the destruction and its causes, and to work on unifying ourselves with each other, not to speak Lashon Hara, not to be angry at each other, not to bear grudges against one another, to be unified, to care, to be kind, to be helpful. All this is part of what we need to contemplate next Tuesday when we observe Asara B'Tevis, when we come to that day of judgment, so that we should be able to merit a judgment that will be different than the judgments that we've had until now. That we should merit to have a judgment of the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu B'Meher V'Yameinu with the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. Have a wonderful evening.